The Girl with the Six Marks, The Battle of New York City, Chapter 2. Continued. Their eyes locked for what seemed like hours. Alyanna was vaguely aware of her legs moving towards him, her eyes never leaving his. The mark on her shoulder began to throb the closer she got to him. Tony himself couldn't believe it. His soulmate was none other than Sergeant Jones herself, the daughter of Dr. Arnold Jones and the war hero who single-handedly saved her platoon with no special powers and definitely no fancy armor suit. His soul growled at the idea of his soulmate being in the line of danger, but it also soared at how proud it was of her. He watched her every move like a hawk as she slowly made it to the stairs and then took to the stage. She was absolutely beautiful, exotic, and extremely mesmerizing. He'd seen pictures of her online, but not once did he pay close attention to the details of her face like he was now. His soulmate had been right under his nose the whole time. Alyanna couldn't believe what was happening. Her soulmate was right here in front of her, and it was Tony freaking Stark, billionaire genius and Iron Man. She walked across the stage towards him, her surroundings slowly evaporating as her focus zoomed in on the man in front of her. "Sergeant Jones," he whispered, barely audible. "Alyanna," she muttered instinctively. Tony held out his hand, slightly shaking at the anticipation of the first touch. Alyanna swallowed before reaching up and placing her hand in his. As soon as their fingers touched, a spark of electricity shot through both of their arms, but not one dared to move. The feeling of total bliss washed over them, and their marks finally calmed, now buzzing with pleasure. The crowd was silent as they watched the interaction of soulmates meeting for the first time. Whispers of what they were witnessing slowly began to spread across the room. Cameras began to flash, and the sudden rush of their surroundings brought the pair back to reality. Alyanna snapped her eyes to the audience, smiling with embarrassment as she accepted the plaque. Tony couldn't help but feel a huge grin spread across his face at the sight of her. He turned to the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, Sergeant Jones, Alyanna, my soulmate." The crowd erupted into a roar of awe as everyone rose to their feet. Alyanna couldn't believe he just announced that to everyone. The cameras flashed, and she knew this would be all over the media by the end of the night. She should feel embarrassed, but instead pride filled her as the thought of her soulmate wanting to show her off. She looked back at Tony and saw him grinning madly. He offered his hand again, and she accepted eagerly. He led her off the stage and brought her towards a hall that led away from the banquet. Dinner began, and the conversations about what just happened flowed through the room. As soon as they were out of the public eye, Tony turned to Alyanna and brought her into a tight embrace. He smelled her hair and nearly moaned at her scent. 23 years I've waited for you, and not a moment did I think you were going to be as beautiful and amazing as you really are." She blushed deeply. "I've known you my whole life, and not once did I think one of my soulmates was you." Tony felt himself freeze at her words. "Wait, one of your soulmates? Do you have more than one?" His tone turned slightly jealous, but he kept it polite. He didn't want to scare his soulmate away. Alyanna felt her heart race in her ears. She hoped the idea of her having more than one soulmate wouldn't be displeasing to him. I have 6, including you." Tony's eyes bulged. 2 or 3 was common, but 6? "You're telling me I waited 23 years for my soulmate just to tell me I have to share her with 5 others?" She smiled sheepishly. "If it makes you feel any better, you are the first one I've met." Tony nodded. "That actually does make me feel better." She laughs, turning to show him her right shoulder. "This one is yours." Tony reaches up and gently runs a couple of fingers down the red circle with the yellow triangle. The feeling of her soulmate touching his mark sent shivers down her spine. Tony patted his right breast. "Yours is right here, but you'll see this later once I take off all my clothes." He winked at her. She giggled and blushed. Never in her life had she ever felt like such a schoolgirl. "The world will know about this by morning." Tony hums, his arms finding their way around his newly found soulmate once again. "I apologize for being so open. My initial instinct was to claim you in front of everyone. Suddenly it dawned on her. You are Iron Man. He chuckled. Why, yes, I am. Impressed? Don't you have enemies? He hummed once more. Now that you have a soulmate, wouldn't your enemies try to... Fuck! He suddenly barks, moving away from her. He palms his face. You are so right. I am such a dumbass. She felt herself moving to him instinctively. You are not a dumbass. He looks up at her, taking in every detail of her face. Where are you currently living? I live in a temporary apartment until my next assignment. I have the next 3 months off. How do you feel about moving in with me? She felt her mouth drop open. To stay in Stark Tower? Think about it. You're safer with me than without. I can keep an eye on you, and I have the best security in all the world. She felt herself playfully glare at him. I can take care of myself, you know. He looked at the plaque she was still holding. Oh, honey, I know how capable you are. But it would make me feel better if you were here. She thought about it for a moment. She did have 3 months of just relaxing and recovering. What else was she going to do? And now that the world will know by tomorrow that she is soulmates with Tony Stark, it would probably be safer to stay with him. Okay, I'll stay with you. He fist bumps the air before pulling her into him. Thank you, my dear, he whispers before bringing his face to her, capturing her lips with his. They kissed for a moment, their whole bodies surging as they sealed their bond. The rest of the banquet went smoothly. Tony joined her at the table she was originally sitting at, his arms around her chair, a display of claiming what was his. Many people approached them to congratulate them on their newly found bond, while others asked many questions. James Rhodes slapped Tony on the back. Congratulations, my man. You got yourself an amazing woman, he complimented, giving Alyanna a wink. Tony felt his chest fill with pride. I know, Rhodey, she's one of a kind, he boasts, rubbing her shoulders affectionately. Alyanna beams in return, her cheeks flushed from the attention. Her phone suddenly went off. She pulls it out and looks down to see Annie calling her. She must have heard the news. She looks up to Tony and smiles at him apologetically. I'm going to step out for a minute, she tells him as she stands. He rises with her. Everything all right? She nods and gives him a smile before turning and heading for the restroom. Tony watches after her, his eyes never leaving her frame until she disappeared. Next scene, restroom. Alyanna answers her phone the moment she steps into the restroom. Word sure spreads fast, she comments instead of saying hello. There was a squeal on the other end. Did I not tell you? Do you know what this means? Alyanna walks to the mirror, glancing at her appearance. You can finally stop harassing me into finding my soulmates, she guesses. She could practically see Annie roll her eyes. You still have 5 more. But who could compete with Iron Man? Wait, does this mean you're rich? It was Alyanna's turn to roll her eyes. Firstly, none of my soulmates could compete with each other. Secondly, it's his money, not mine. But I did get a check for $250,000 donated in my name. Annie hums on the other line. Are you guys going to get married? Annie, she exclaims. We just met. Besides, I already told you that marriage isn't a possibility, since I have 6 soulmates. It just wouldn't be fair. You're right, but hey, I shouldn't be keeping you anymore. Get back out there and show Mrs. Stark what you got. Shaking her head, she hung up the phone, turning to exit the restroom. Alyanna almost bumps into another woman. Excuse me, she says, looking up to see a tall, slender, red-headed woman. She was wearing a very formal gray dress, her ginger hair curled down her back. Her eyes sparkled with mystery. 6 soulmates, huh? That must be hard. The strange woman remarks, looking Alyanna up and down. Alyanna felt uneasy around her. Yeah, but I'll manage. The woman's lips turn up into a smirk. Well, better keep a close eye on them. Wouldn't want one of them to feel left out and seek attention elsewhere. Alyanna found her whole body freeze. Who the hell did this woman think she is? Excuse me? The woman winks at her before turning and walking out of the room. Alyanna follows after her, but when she walks through the door, she caught sight of Tony leaning against the pillar. Mr. Stark? What are you doing? She questions, her heart racing in her ears. He pushes off the pillar and walks over to her, grabbing her hand. Call me Tony, my dear, and I felt uneasiness from you. I wanted to see if you were all right. Oh, right. Soulmate marks connect emotions to one another after the first contact. She frowns, looking around at the strange woman. There was a woman here who just walked out. She said something to me that was strange. Tony waves his hand in a dismissive motion. You will probably be getting a lot of hate from the fan base. I have my own fan club where countless women approach me claiming to be my soulmate. Now that I actually have one, they'll all be crushed. Alyanna didn't seem convinced. The woman was up to something, but she nods anyway, and Tony escorts her back to their table. Next scene, after dinner. Soon it was coming to an end, and people began to retire. Tony grabs Alyanna's hand and leads her out of the room and down the hall to an elevator. Jarvis, my room, please, he orders. The elevator lit up and began to move. Alyanna quirks an eyebrow. Jarvis? Oh, right. Jarvis, meet Alyanna. She's my soulmate, and she'll be staying with us from now on. Suddenly, a proper robotic voice responds. Hello, Miss Alyanna. I have read much about you, and I am pleased to have you here. Alyanna's eyes widen in amazement. It's nice to meet you, she said, unsure, but smiles. Suddenly Tony was on her, kissing her passionately before moving to her neck. Tony grips her waist tightly and pulls her close. She felt her whole body heat up. At the feeling of her soulmate touching her sent waves of pleasure right down to her core. The elevator opens to reveal a fancy penthouse that was Tony's room. He picks her up bridal style, causing her to laugh loudly and hold on to him. He brought her to the bed and laid her down gently. He began to take off his tux, tugging the jacket off along with the bow tie. He unbuttons his white shirt and threw the articles of clothing onto the ground. He tugged the white undershirt over his shoulders to reveal her soul mark. It was a cherry blossom branch with 6 flower blooms. She reached up and traced her flower. 6 blooms make sense now, he said with a chuckle. She giggles and reaches up to pull him to her. They shared another passionate kiss before he was helping her out of her dress. The night continued as the newly bonded couple completed the final step in their soul bond. They laid there in each other's arms as sleep began to creep up on them, and soon they were both joining the dream world.